Okay, hi. This is literally the third time I'm filming this, so I'm gonna make it fast. I'm gonna do it. It's gonna happen. Okay, yes, okay, words. Okay. Okay, we're gonna cover a lot of bases in this video today. We're gonna talk about books. We're gonna talk about consumerism. We're gonna talk about monopolies. We're gonna talk about lots of things. But the main point of this is I honestly don't usually have a lot of physical books that I'm reading. I tend to borrow a lot of ebooks from the library. And while that's very effective as far as not accruing fines, much like most people who like to read, I do like reading physical books. I do like the feel of it, occasionally at least. And so I'm quite excited because in the last month or so, I've actually accrued a good number of books. And so I figured I would talk about them here. Some are borrowed from the library and some are things that I purchased. You know, we're gonna spice it up. We're gonna go from least to most capitalistic. Yeah, okay, I'm at peace with that. Before I get into the books, fair warning, this video is pretty much just going to be vague couple sentence descriptions of these books and why I decided to pick them up, because I like going into books not knowing too much. I didn't want to do a bunch of research about what they were about so I could tell you a lot of details, because that would defeat the purpose of me reading them. So this is going to be like a little taste, you know? If the little blurb that I give based on who knows what sounds vaguely interesting, you can pick it up, maybe you'll like it. But it's not going to be too in-depth, so do with that what you will. And now, let's get into the books. As I said, starting with the least capitalistic, we have my library books. I borrowed 3 physical books from the library, and I'm very excited about all of them. Book number 1 is The Vegetarian by Han Kang. I'm very interested about this book because I have kind of mixed priors. On the one hand, Han Kang wrote Human Acts, which was one of my favorite books of 2020, maybe one of my favorite books of all time. It was absolutely beautiful, and I was really excited to pick up more of her work. So I'm really excited for The Vegetarian. But on the other hand, Kayla from Books and Lala read this and really, really disliked it. I generally tend to like a lot of the weird books that she likes. I am less picky than her, though, so I am hopeful. Also, just Human Acts is so mind-blowing that I'm really excited to read this. What is this book about? I should tell you. So, The Vegetarian is a book about a woman who decides to be vegetarian, basically, and rather than just about that, it's more about the backlash from her community and her husband and her family that she faces, and a look into gender structures and gender roles and class structure within South Korean culture. I'm very excited about it. It sounds unique at the very least, and I'm curious to see what my opinion on it ends up being. Okay, that's book 1. Speaking of Kayla from Books and Lala, book number 2 is based entirely on a recommendation from her, and that is We Ride Upon Sticks by Kwan Berry. I heard about this from one of her videos, and as far as I can tell, so I think this takes place in the 80s, and it follows an entire field hockey team in high school. So it's first person plural, it's written in the we form, which sounds just absolutely wild. So for that alone, I'm really interested to pick this up. It seems like it's got some witches in it, it's got some feminism, it's got some LGBT representation, potentially. It's set in the 80s, and it's got a really interesting premise of being written from the point of view of an entire field hockey team. So I'm sold. I have no idea whether or not I'm actually going to like this book, but if nothing else, it sounds very interesting. So we'll see. Okay, and book 3, the final book from the library, is Red Clocks by Lenny Zumas. So this I actually heard about from Kat from Paperback Dreams, had a video with her sister, and her sister recommended this book. And the vague premise sounded really cool, and I think the cover is really beautiful, and that was enough for me to go and get it from the library. This book kind of gives me Handmaid's Tale vibes, as far as I can tell. It takes place in sort of this alternate reality where abortions are totally illegal, in vitro fertilization is totally illegal, and basically fetuses at any stage are more or less treated as human, and it follows these 5 women living in this world interacting with the laws surrounding abortion. The question of abortion is a really interesting one because the difference between being pro-life and pro-choice is so axiomatic. It's something that's very difficult to argue because people believe so strongly in their own belief, and it's murder versus totally okay. It's so different. And so books that deal with that and kind of talk about abortion and look more into the philosophy of it within the context of a fiction story are really appealing to me. And that's all I know about it, so I'm gonna move on. Okay. And now we have our second tier of capitalism, and that is books that I bought directly from a publisher. For context, Harper Perennial is this publisher, and they do this thing every year where they create the olive editions of certain books, where they choose like a handful of books from their backlist and revamp the covers and create this really cohesive set. The olive editions for any given year are only available in that year. The olive editions for this past year, 2020, I thought were really beautiful, and there was 2 books on it that I was already interested in reading, and so I picked both of them up. The first book that I bought from Harper Perennial is Commonwealth by Ann Patchett. Truth be told, I know very little about this book. I've heard good things about it from one of my best friends, and I think this cover and edition is just really gorgeous. From what I can understand, it's some kind of family drama that spans many generations, and it's all centered around some deep, dark secret within the family. I've read a couple of sort of generational family dramas, like House of the Spirits, Vanishing Half. I do like the generational aspect, and so I am excited to pick this one up, and also excited to own it because it's super pretty. So that's that. The next book that I picked up from the Olive Edition set is Moonglow by Michael Chabon? I don't know, but okay, let's just take a moment. They're just really cute together, and I'm happy. Also, for context, the reason I picked this book up is because a couple of years ago I read The Amazing Adventures of Kavalier and Clay, and I quite enjoyed it. I think I felt as though I didn't get as much out of it as I wanted to. Like, I would have benefited from reading it in class rather than by myself, but I did really enjoy the story and the writing. So I've been looking for more of Chabon's work to pick up. So when I saw this in the Olive Edition set, I got super excited and decided to buy it. But the vague story for this one is it's about a man on his deathbed telling his life story to our narrator, I believe, or maybe the old man is a narrator. I think that's just a cool premise, and I think depending on where it goes, it could be a really exciting read, like about a person's entire life, almost autobiographical, but not actually because it's fiction. So I am super psyched to pick this up. I actually don't know when I'm going to get to it. I'm notoriously bad at reading books I actually own because I get so many books from the library. But I am glad I own it because I will eventually read it. So that is book number 2. Now we come to our third and final tier of capitalism, and that is books that I bought from Barnes & Noble. I did not quite reach the level of capitalism that is Amazon with its massive monopoly. So the first book I picked up is Cleanness by Garth Greenwell. To be totally honest, this is the book that I know the absolute least about. I picked this up because I'd read a couple of articles kind of at the end of 2020 from The New Yorker where different New Yorker literary critics and contributors were talking about their favorite books of the year, and I saw this book mentioned in 2 different articles, so that immediately intrigued me. I think I'm always really curious about what literary critics say about books and what types of books critics enjoy and where my taste overlaps versus where it diverges. Also, something that both people mentioned when they talked about Cleanness is the really beautiful poetic writing style, and I am very attracted to really effective poetic prose. Sometimes it just is too flowery and it detracts from the point, but I think certain authors like Carmen Maria Machado or Han Kang use poetic prose really effectively, and I'm very curious to see if Garth Greenwell will be another author for whom I feel like that is the case. Eventually I will read it, and then you and I will both know what it's about. So yeah. The next book that I picked up is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. So this one has been talked about literally everywhere for the last year. This book actually received kind of middling reviews from a lot of my favorite book reviewers, but the reason I picked it up is because it is, I believe, the book that has the longest holds list at my library, or was put on hold the most often, and so it felt very unlikely that I would quickly attain it. Additionally, I know that it's kind of like a gothic haunted house horror story, and I don't read a lot of horror. I get scared pretty easily. Book reviewers and readers who are used to horror maybe found this to be not that scary, but that's probably not that indicative of how scary I will find it, and so I'm still really excited to pick this up. For context, this book is about Noemi, whose cousin marries this fancy man, but then writes back to her saying, something seems wrong. The house is haunted or the husband is haunted, something weird is happening. And so Naomi goes to her cousin to try to help out and kind of get the vibe of what's going on. I have read a good number of Gothic novels that tends to be pretty heavily featured in American literature classes, but I have never read a Mexican Gothic. So we will see what it's like, and eventually, once I read it, I will report back. The final book we're going to talk about in this haul is Mr. Fox by Helen Oyeyemi. So I read What Is Not Yours Is Not Yours by Helen Oyeyemi last July, and that is a short story collection where every story features kind of like secrets or doors and keys and locks and stuff, and every story also has a lot of magical realism in it, and I was really blown away by how different every story felt and how compelling every story was despite being really starkly different. I'm really excited about reading her full-length novel. I tend to enjoy full-length novels a little bit more than short stories, and I'll be really interested to see when she writes a novel which style from her short story collection she decides to go for. Her writing was captivating and like confusing in that perfect way, so I'm really excited to read this full-length novel. It's about a married couple, Mr. and Mrs. Fox, who are both writers, I believe, and then Mr. Fox finds his muse and starts having an affair with her, and then it's about Mr. Fox's relationship with the muse, Mary, and wife, and kind of the weird things that happen. I'm honestly not sure how weird or normal this book is going to be. I think it can really go either way, but I am very curious to find out. I also just happen to think this book is really beautiful, so I'm very happy to now physically own it. And that's it. Those are all the books. I'm doing it. It's happening. I did it. These are all the books that I have attained via borrowing or purchasing in the last month. I am very excited to have them all. Hopefully you will see them all on this channel sometime in the upcoming months, or if we're being realistic, years. I hope you enjoyed this book haul. Okay. And I will see you in the next video.